Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 654 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Eilon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our ninth book just came out. It's called From Letters to Leaders, The Legacy of Service. So I want you to go and pick up that book on Amazon today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, sometimes we have so much fun on a podcast with a particular guest that we absolutely positively have to find a way to bring them back because the first episode was so successful. And when our next guest started talking about kindness, I was like, whoa, we have got to talk more about that on college campuses today. So here we are, and let's get a little intro on our next guest. On top of Lindsay Barnett's extensive training as a certified integral coach, she has spent more than 2 decades leading and transforming organizations at every stage of growth. From startups to global enterprises like Mattel, she has worked through hypergrowth, integrations, and organizational redesigns, always drawn to the moments when people and systems are in motion and transformation is possible. Lindsay's own career has been a story of reinvention. She has pivoted across roles, industries, and continents, pursuing flexibility and purpose as her life and values evolved. Lindsay has lived and worked abroad, immersed in different cultures, and learned firsthand how perspective expands when you step outside of what's familiar. Those experiences taught her that transformation isn't just organizational, it's deeply personal. Welcome back to the show, Lindsay.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Mike.
Yeah, I think that's new since the last time we were talking,
Yes,
that whole doctor thing. That's definitely
yes.
a fun journey, and I enjoyed that tremendously. But Mike is just fine. I'm not really into the whole formal, discussions. Mike is perfectly fine, but I do appreciate that for sure.
Yes, yes,
Now, what's so fascinating about you is that you've worked with Fortune 500 companies. You've worked with startups as well. You've taught
yeah.
organizational culture at the University of Southern California. So, talk to us about what you are seeing right now in terms of stress, isolation, division, and how do these ideas show up differently for college students today?
Yeah, yeah. So I think, the stress may particularly be an obvious one right now, right? There's, economic, global instability, and, just the loneliness epidemic is real. I am not an expert in all of the root causes around those things, but I think, where I do see things is where they're showing up. And I think on college campuses, where, with respect to, the economic instability, I think there's a lot of stress around finding jobs right now, especially with AI and entry-level jobs just morphing into something else we don't know right now. Like there's a lot of unknown in the traditional go to college, get a job, track. So there's a lot of unknown there. Obviously, campuses have a lot more activist activity. So that can also sow a little bit of division and, unknown of what side are you on versus how do we come together and actually talk about things and bridge some of that division. And then, just the loneliness epidemic in a lot of ways is fueled by this, convenience culture, right? You can get anything you want online. So it's takes a lot more effort to actually come together, which is where I think, Greek life is a beautiful thing because it does, offer both a structure and a framing for people to come together.
Yeah, I totally agree. That is
Yeah.
definitely one of the reasons why I'm a big proponent of the fraternity and sorority system. I know for me personally, that was a big deal in terms of the isolation that I had my first semester on the
Yeah.
campus with 30,000 students and just not knowing how do I interact with 30,000 students. And
Yeah.
so I immediately just went into isolation mode, and we know that that's not healthy. And all
Yeah.
of the statistics back up what I'm talking about in terms of men and even women too, just not really having a lot of really close friends. And
Yeah.
that is problematic. If we know things about Maslow's hierarchy, we really need to, have belongingness and love on a college campus in order to be successful. If we don't feel like we belong, there's no way that we are going to achieve our full potential in life. And so I think you are right on the money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Now, when we talk about kindness, you mentioned that it really isn't just nice to have, it's actually neurological. So, can you
Yeah.
explain what's happening in the brain and your body when somebody gives or even witnesses an act of
Yeah.
kindness?
Yeah, yeah. So that's actually what you just mentioned is the cool thing is that there is a acts of kindness, whether they are given, received, or even witnessed, like you don't even have to do anything, just pay attention, uh, trigger the brain's reward circuitry. So it releases dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, which researchers call the happiness trifecta. So dopamine reinforces the behavior, serotonin promotes calm and emotional balance, and then oxytocin enhances trust and connection, which actually strengthen the neural pathways that make social connection feel safe and rewarded. So it's important stuff.
It's very important stuff, and I'm glad you mentioned all of those things. And I hope that the fraternity and sorority leaders are paying attention and trying to figure out, okay, how do we spread this kindness idea around campus? Because it's going to start bouncing all over the place, because it is so neurological. And the statistic about perpetually kind people having
Yeah.
23% less cortisol is really powerful to me.
Yeah.
Why do you think that college students today underestimate kindness as a stress reduction strategy?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think students in particular are primed to treat stress as a productivity problem, right? Like I have XYZ tasks to do, and therefore I'm stressed because it feels like I don't have enough time to do it, right? It's like a very um time equals results equals outputs, kind of formula.
Mm.
And therefore, it's something to push through. Like, I won't get enough sleep, or I won't, like, I'll hear all the things that I'll sacrifice to get things done. But really, stress is comes from all different places. And the beautiful thing of acts of kindness, right? It creates this chemical happiness trifecta that can kind of soothe the stress. And it doesn't have to be aligned to time management or productivity. Not to say that those things don't help, but if that's your only solution, you're missing out on all these other ways that you can help yourself kind of reduce the cortisol.
Mm.
So,
Great
yeah.
points. And also, some of the latest research that I've seen out of Cornell actually talks about community service and giving back.
Mhm.
And that actually increases your happiness is to give
Yep.
back to your community. So I think,
Yep.
some of the things you're seeing in terms of kindness, some of the things that we're seeing, the research out of Cornell on community service and happiness, I think
Yeah,
all of these things are all interrelated.
for
Um,
sure.
so really interesting stuff. Now, you know that college students today, and especially fraternity and sorority members, because they have that added responsibility on campus, they are juggling so many things. They are
Yeah.
juggling academics, they're juggling leadership, social life, internships, family. How does chronic stress change how we treat each other as humans?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple different things. I think one, when we are in a state of chronic stress, there are linkages to it actually reducing empathy. So if we are more in that which is why there's an interesting connection to the volunteering, right? Because in
Right.
a lot of ways, that social service bolsters the empathy connections. So when we're stressed, we're just in our like little box of I got to do these things. And it does, anyone who walks in front of us is they're on a mission to get in our way. So it's a different thing. We have to really be able to take that pause to think through, okay, that person that just crossed in front of me, they're busy too, right? How do I have empathy for them? They're not here to make my day bad, right?
Hmm.
Like they're having a hard day too, and how do I like let go of that, anger or whatever I have at them, cutting me off on the sidewalk. But really that's where sometimes the simplest thing of just being able to pause, take a breath, puts you back in, it calms your nervous system and helps you regulate your nervous system. But it puts you back in that place of, okay, where's my choice here? Do I want to choose to be kind? How do I want to respond versus when we're super stressed out, we're just like reacting because we just don't have that in us to like pause. What should we do now? Right? We're just in this amped up mode.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm seeing more and more that this kindness and certainly community service, building empathy, I think all of these things are really the answer to what we've been searching for in terms of stress on college campuses today. Again, another reason why I'm a big proponent of the fraternity and sorority system. I do believe that giving back to your community is an integral part of belonging to these
Yeah.
organizations, and so
Yeah.
that is giving us real reasons to promote fraternity and sorority membership. I'm wondering, do you see a connection between burnout
Yeah.
and also unkindness? Is there a connection there?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to the stress dynamic, right?
Hmm.
When we're burned out, we're just too exhausted to really be in that place of, nervous system regulation to actually really be mindful of how we're behaving and the impact that it has on other people. So there's also a little bit of a vicious cycle too, because unkindness can actually also fuel burnout, right? So if people are being unkind to us, then that depletes our systems from a place of either um, just like feeling like we need to mask to fit in, or we are bullying, things like that, right? All of those things have an impact on our mental health but also our physical health too.
Yeah.
So they are definitely correlated.
Yeah, I can see that completely. When I lived in New York, I remember everybody's burnt out in New York. I mean, we're all just fighting for survival because, I mean,
Yeah.
taxes are super high, cost of living is super high. So it just felt like you were always just like treading water and barely able to keep, your head above water for oxygen. It, like barely, barely, right? And
Yeah.
I noticed that, really kindness was not something that I would see in that environment very often. You
Um,
just don't see it because people are literally so burnt out that they don't even talk to their neighbors. Like we had neighbors
yeah.
that literally we didn't know wouldn't talk to us even though they were outside just because they were burned out and stressed, right?
Yeah.
And then that completely changed that dynamic. Moving to Tennessee, it just feels like there's a lot less stress, a little bit lower cost of living, more sunshine, more outdoor
Yeah.
exercise. And so suddenly I'm just seeing a lot more kindness. And so that's
Mhm.
why I was wondering about that correlation there.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I've studied in my doctorate program is really hazing prevention. I think for me,
Yeah.
that's something that's really important, and also psychological safety as well
For
in
sure.
Greek life. So I'm wondering, do you believe that if we had more everyday kindness, that that could actually reduce the likelihood of harmful behaviors on a college campus?
Oh, yes. It's interesting, right? I feel like if you think about it, and I feel like you talk about this a little bit in your research, right? Like the
Hmm.
power of mentorship.
Hmm.
at the end of the day, it's how are we creating a sense of belonging? Are we creating a sense of belonging through like trauma bonding? Like we survived? Because that is a much less sustainable form of connection than, mentoring someone. Here's how we operate in our mini culture, right? Here's how we like to take care of each other, or show each other respect, right? Those kinds of things create real sense of belonging where I can be safe to be myself and be silly and play and do all of these things versus kind of being forced to do something either myself or forced to do something to somebody else that really isn't in alignment with my values.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
yeah, the belonging is there's a lot of different ways to foster belonging, and those are the more sustainable ways that you talk about, right? Where you have psychological safety, you've got true belonging in an organization.
Right. 100%. I mean, when we look at Maslow's hierarchy, safety is the second step, and then there's love and belonging. So if we have safety, then we
Yeah.
can have love and belonging in our organization. And also, Aldo Simino, he's done really, really great research in this area, and he actually studied that exact question. Does hazing increase solidarity in fraternities? And he actually
Yeah.
followed around a fraternity that was hazing their new members, did
Yeah.
interviews with the new members on a weekly basis to ask them, do you feel solidarity to the organization
Yeah.
going through this? And what was the answer? No, absolutely not. Right? Maybe there's some trauma bonding going on, like you mentioned
Yeah.
before, but there's no
Yeah.
solidarity to the organization. And so I think it just kind of takes that myth away from college students that believe that if we haze that somehow that we're going to have solidarity in our organization. It's quite the
Yeah.
opposite. You might actually
Yeah.
end up with four cliques in your organization that don't talk to each other
Yeah.
because that was the group that hazed us.
Right.
And so he actually did find a high correlation between having fun and group
Mhm.
solidarity. So if you want group solidarity, if that is the end goal, then have
Yeah.
fun in your organization. That is going to get you where you
Yeah.
need to go. So
Yeah.
again, really just fascinating conversation. Now, we have a lot of high achieving students that listen to our podcast. I mean, these are leaders in fraternities and sororities on college campuses today. But I think we also should talk about not only kindness, but self-kindness. What does
Yeah.
self-kindness look like for a high achieving student?
So practically speaking, I tried to think of a way to simplify this. In a lot
Mhm.
of ways, self-kindness for high achievers means treating a setback the way you'd treat a friend who had the same setback, right? Like how do we look at ourselves the way we would treat a friend versus oftentimes that inner critic and the harsh self-criticism, like I got to do and I got to get this done and how did I let that fail and whatnot. Like self-kindness is like, would you do say that to a friend? Probably not, right? To a friend you'd be like, it'll be okay, it'll be fine. So how do we start to practice giving ourselves grace, for one? And then I think the other big thing that I think really took me later in life to really think about is how do I recognize my own battery levels,
Mhm.
right? And so the whole concept of pushing through is not really very kind to ourselves, right? If we're pushing through, what we're saying is I'm already at, under 50% battery and I'm just going to keep depleting lower and lower versus hold on, I'm below 50%. This is not optimal for me. What can I do to actually recharge my battery? Well, I'm going to grab coffee with a friend or go for a walk and get physical exercise and connection, or I'm going to take a 20-minute power nap. Like what does what is my body telling me that I need that I've been previously ignoring, right? Like you, again, you wouldn't do that to a friend, right? If a friend said to you, I'm so tired, I'm exhausted, you wouldn't say, just keep powering through, right? You'd be like, why don't you take a break? Why don't we take a walk? Or well, let's grab coffee. So really, I think to me, fundamentally, for those like supercharged high achievers, starting to find your replenishment and capacity strategies will actually serve you and actually achieving more without harming yourself.
That's great advice. Really good stuff. The other thing too is I post a lot of content on social media around hazing prevention and really finding substitutes, replacement activities that don't involve mental or physical abuse of other students.
Yeah,
And it's interesting just to read some of the comments on social media. It's like there's definitely an edge to it.
yeah,
And I think that also many students are afraid that kindness somehow equals weakness in
I
today's
know.
society. So,
Yeah,
how can we reframe this?
yeah. And it's so fascinating to me too, because to me, kindness is so strong to be able to tell someone something that they don't want to hear in a way that is kind enables them to receive it. It enables you to move past any awkwardness, discomfort. You're fostering human dignity. That is way harder to do than almost anything else. Like if I think about like in my leadership development, putting on my leadership development hat, having difficult conversations is probably managers' number one fear, the number one thing that they struggle with. So, fostering kindness while you're in college and being able to, I mean, like I just think of like a simple example, right? You mentioned the kind of like cliques and in groups and out groups. And I remember when I was in the sorority and, there'd be a party that night and people would be like, what time are you going? What are you wearing? Can I borrow this or that? Right.
Mhm.
And, sometimes there were times where people would just get together and they would be like, we're all going to dress the same, or we're going to go together and we're going to fill up one car. To be able, just taking at like the very basic level, if someone's like, hey, are you going? Can I go with you? To, be kind enough to say, gosh, wish we had room, but, the five of us planned this beforehand. We can't wait to see you at the party, but, we just don't have room versus ignoring them, ghosting them, like those things. You can be nice to their face, like, oh, yeah, totally. And then, like, behind the scenes, your behavior is the opposite. But being kind is way harder because you have to actually navigate potentially your feelings about disappointing somebody, actually disappointing somebody. That's way harder of a skill to master than, being nice, right? And I think that some of that confusion between kindness, being kind and being nice is where some of that kind of, kindness is soft
Yeah,
comes
that
from.
helps quite a bit. Now, I know that you were involved with kindness and even community service as an undergraduate. So, how do these kindness habits that we form in college, how does that impact somebody over the long term in their career over a lifetime?
So I think it comes back a little bit to, some of the things that we were talking about earlier as it relates to stress.
Hmm.
So I think, in college, in a lot of ways, that's some of the highest stress time and first real stress, right? Like you may have stress in high school, but you're in this, the familial structure. Hopefully that's not providing additional stress in your life. But in some cases it is.
Yeah.
But for some people, college is the first time that you're really experiencing stress where you're accountable for yourself entirely.
Mhm.
So the habits that you practice in college become your default operating mode in life and in leadership. So that's part one is just like, how do I create some good habits? Part two, the skills that kindness builds: empathy, psychological safety, trust, connection, leading with care. Those are like the most effective leaders. So if you have aspirations to be a leader someday, and I know the Greek system offers a lot of opportunities for leadership, for practicing that too, being a kind, caring, trustworthy, connective leader is just going to set you up for greater success down the road, for
Totally
sure.
agree. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, I want to talk about you too a little bit personally because you've navigated a ton of burnout yourself.
Yeah.
So, how did this idea of kindness, whether it be towards yourself or maybe to other people, how did that play a role in your recovery with burnout?
Yeah. I think there's a couple things. I think burnout and just pulling the thread from some of the things that we talked about earlier,
Mhm.
we're such a doing culture, right? Like so much is like about productivity and doing and tasks and results and recognition and external validation and all of that. I think for me, um, recovery from burnout isn't just about doing less, it's also about redirecting your attention. And we can focus our attention. We can, if you take the person, everyone, two people, they're both doing the exact same things, right? Like from a task perspective, you can actually track you're doing the exact same things. To me, the difference is from an attention perspective, where am I redirecting my attention? Am I spending my time and attention celebrating wins? Am I spending time and attention taking care of myself, connecting with others, feeling like I'm helping people and noticing that? Or am I noticing things like, well, they have more than I have? Am I noticing things like, I did all this work, but they took all the credit. Whatever it is that's kind of fueling your burnout, if you can start to prime yourself to be noticing the good things, the kindnesses that are coming in and out of your life, that it doesn't take more time or energy, but it really has that, neurological shift that can support you.
hmm Yeah, that's why I think it just giving gratitude to all the things that you have each day, even if you just started out each day just thinking about all the things that you're grateful for,
Yeah,
I think that can really reframe the rest of your day in a very positive way.
yeah, yeah,
I started thinking about stuff like that. I mean, I remember 10 years ago, I was literally praying to be in this spot where I am today.
yeah,
And so when you think about that, it's like, man, how fortunate I am to be able to reach that and just paying that forward and making sure that other people remember that same concept. I think we can get a kinder society just by
yeah,
being grateful for what we have.
yeah,
So
yeah,
really interesting stuff. All right. Well, listen, I've really enjoyed our conversation as always. So if our college student listeners want to get involved, I know you have this new nonprofit where you're making
yeah,
the world kinder and healthier. It's called Our Kind of Club, which
yes,
I think is so fascinating. How can they get involved with this new nonprofit?
yeah. So, first of all, I don't know if I told you this, but my other co-founders are friends from my sorority days.
That's so good. No, I didn't know
Yes,
that. I didn't realize they were
yes,
also
yes.
sorority women. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So we go way, way back. But basically you can find us, the easiest way to find us is at ourkindofclub.com. There you can register for, we have these events monthly. They're virtual events called Kindness Campfires,
Mhm.
where they're just an hour and people have a chance to share some of reflections on where they're at in their own kindness journey, how kindness they're seeing, doing is impacting them, as well as sharing stories of kindness. So you get that bubble effect of kind of witnessing through hearing different stories of kindness and recognizing where you've been kind in your life and some of the practices that are supporting your kindness in the world. And we also are, we're also doing train the trainers now for people to host kindness campfires wherever they are. Again, they're just 1 hour, but it follows a very simple framework. And every time we do it, people just like it feels like you've been in a warm bath for an hour. Like you just feel so good from talking oftentimes with total strangers about kindness. And it just really has such an impact on the rest of my day.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I
So,
love this.
encourage
Kindness
people to check it out.
campfires. Man. This is
Yes.
awesome. This is so cool. This is definitely, obviously, right up the alley of every fraternity and sorority member who's listening. And I would just, in my mind, I'm thinking about how can we spread this across college campuses and really have the fraternity and sorority leaders be responsible for these kindness campfires that they're
Yeah.
hosting on a college campus. And I think everybody, whether you're Greek or not Greek, totally resonates with today's college students, with Gen Z, about giving back,
Yeah.
making the world a better place. This is what Gen Z really cares about at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love what you're doing. And now I feel like we have to give a plug to your sorority because I mean, you started this organization, ourkindofclub.com. You started the organization with your sorority sisters. So you might
Yeah.
as well tell everybody what sorority you're in.
We were in Alpha Chi Omega.
All right, there you go.
Yeah.
You are in Alpha Chi Omega. I'm going to make
Yes.
that distinction. This is a very
Yes.
important
Yes.
distinction because you
Yes.
are a member
Lifetime
for life.
membership.
That's
Yes.
right. Don't
Yes.
say past tense. I was in Alpha Chi Omega. No, 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 no. You are an Alpha Chi Omega,
Yes.
and so
Yes.
are your sisters. And I think that's fantastic. I love what you're
Yeah.
building. The website is ourkindofclub.com. Go to the
Yeah.
website. Go and just participate any way that you can with
Yeah.
one of these kindness campfires. I think would be super cool
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have on a college campus. I think it would be
Yes.
fantastic and a great recruitment tool, I might add, for other students who
Yes.
maybe are not involved with fraternity and sorority life. So I can think of
Yeah.
all kinds of applications on what you're doing here, Lindsay.
I like the way you're thinking. And then if people can't participate in the campfires, we have a newsletter too, which has lots of like tips and stories and research around the health related benefits to kindness. So there's a lot of goodness there too. So
Fantastic. Well, look up that Cornell study, and I think you'll add
yeah,
it to the newsletter in terms
yeah,
of the benefits of doing community service and happiness. I think you're going to love
yeah.
it, and I think that'll be something that you'll be able to add to your newsletter for sure. All right.
Awesome.
Well, really cool. This has been a lot of fun. Lindsay, as always, thank you so much
Yeah.
for being a part of
Yeah.
our podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's our pleasure. And to our listeners, if you learned something today from Lindsay Barnett, and I know that you did, I need you to share this episode with your chapter. So throw a link in a group chat with your chapter, share it on social media. You really never know who needs to hear this message today. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Bye for now.